So I'm pretty sure, and starting off here with Rick Thompson and Anton. Thanks a lot, you guys. I'm pretty sure that we have not gotten to the sponsors
I was wondering
as much. So I think before I skip it, jump into that, and then we'll start talking about a little list of shit here that I think could be interesting conversations.
the plan. Well, Jaz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by Stone Depot. Exceptional Cannabis is their name. Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, the Detroit Nutrient Company, GrowGreenMI.com, Custom 420 Promos, and Culture Clothing.
Nice. All good people and companies and all that kind of stuff. Red Sutter right off the bat. He was a sponsor today. I didn't run into him. I'm not sure if he was there, but he was a sponsor of today's rally, which is one of the things we're going to get to. And it was about Decriminalize nature movement and kind of re-energizing that and looking to 2024, hopefully to get on the ballot with something, assuming that it doesn't go through the legislature, but that obviously is not very
not likely.
Legendary Kirk Reed jumps on from Oklahoma.
Captain.
I believe he's telling us his condition right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
fairly high percentage chance anyway.
Yep, and everyone around him as well. It's probably that way.
Probably that way too. Yeah. He's putting out some good products down in Oklahoma. Originally gotten into cannabis pretty heavily here in Michigan. Originally from Oklahoma though, and he did not make it out. But that was the case for a lot of people, and it wasn't ideal conditions. But as I told the crowd, there are days like this in cannabis too, and they all matter, and it's all moving forward. And we're all gathering there. We're sharing information. We're energizing. We're going to go out and talk to other people, and and it was, there you go. And it was, a lot of people mentioned the dude, the national co-founder who was at EntheoFest came in for this, and kind of unexpectedly. That was cool for a lot of people, and he addressed everyone. It was like, this is a beautiful fall day in Michigan, Well,
it's got to be cool. Very special to speak on the steps of a Capitol building on behalf of the entheogenic substance community. I can't imagine that's happened too many other times in American history.
Yeah, this is like this new movement, and I really gave recognition to this group. They're just organizing, communicating, doing what they need to do, passing these local initiatives, getting ready for this next very difficult statewide effort. There's been no funding, and it's very difficult. They well, here we go right here. We'll bring in Michael File himself when he gets the connection going, and talk about, you want to stay away from the commercialization, from the corporatization, from the big money interests. Yet that is a pathway to getting some movement when moving things forward a little bit. If some of those people believe they're about ready to cash in on it, it's a really difficult line. And we've run into some issues in cannabis. We hope that we can learn from some of that stuff as these guys continue to be successful moving forward. I'm going to try to bring him on and see if it works. Hey, are you there, man? He might not be able with a great connection at the moment.
He's at the center of the storm, the eye of the storm.
Yeah. I'm going to hope that he reconnects. And somebody else is coming on here. Here we go. Oh, cool. Trish?
Yeah, there she is.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Good.
What's up with the eye of the storm?
Oh, I have been freezing my ass off instead of doing
A lot of stuff going on right now.
I had to stop cutting back in my grow for the rally and stuff. So
that sounds like, between weather, between other obligations, all that kind of stuff, it was difficult to get a huge crowd out there. But
yeah. Are you talking about today's rally?
Yeah, some good people though, and really good stuff on the steps. And there's days there, and as I said when I had my couple of minutes up there, that a lot of days like that in cannabis too, and it was all part of how we move the needle forward. So
I watched it live from home. That was cool to be able to have that option.
See if we can get Michael File on here. He's just not having a good connection with us right now, unfortunately. But obviously one of the organizers, one of the statewide leaders, also on the board of the National Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Mike has a history of bad connections when we try and get them on Jazz.
Yeah.
I think it's the man trying to put us down.
It's his vibrations. Yeah.
No.
All right. Anyway, man, hopefully he'll try to reconnect. He's aware that he's not on here talking with us right now, I'm sure. At least under normal circumstances. That's
It'd
probably
be funny if he was talking, thinking he was online.
Hey, great show. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Rick, you're so awesome. Jamie, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that would be, and obviously he'd be tripping if that were really the case.
That's great. No, yeah, it has been, over the course of the last 14 years, we've been doing rallies since 10, and not all of our rallies were thousands of people. And I remember the anti-Bill Schuette rally. We had a decent number of people there, but not nearly what we had expected.
Still, man, there's more than what they were estimated. I remember the low. I thought the small estimates for that were like 3,000, but we really had probably like 5,000 there, or something like that. I don't know if that's how you remember it.
Which rally are you referring to?
The shortly after the raids in 2010.
Yeah.
Bill Schuette doesn't. Why don't you care about patients? Was a big banner that was behind an airplane that Big Daddy had set up,
flying overhead. Yes.
Yeah.
First time we'd ever done that in the state. It was glorious, man. And it was 5,000 plus. I mean, the whole yard on the Capitol lawn was full all the way out to Michigan Avenue, all the way out to the Capitol road there. That's a time that won't ever be recreated, I think, because at this point we're so far past that. A lot of people aren't fighting for something. At that point, they wanted rights. Now that they've given them rights.
Hey, whereas Mycophile has not been successful yet with a great connection, we do have a good connection with Brittany. So very cool.
Can you guys hear me right now?
Yeah.
So I am at the after party for the Capitol rally currently. Is the music a problem? Can you hear that? Do you want me to?
I guess it comes with the territory. I don't know what else you could do about it. I can hear it, but I can hear you. So, I mean, it works. I think that works.
Okay. Let me know if you want me to mute it.
Go in there and tell everybody to be quiet and for them to turn that off.
Everybody, stop the party.
Hey, so there was a rally today, in spite of it being October 18th and taking a chance on what the weather may be. And it was a little, didn't rain really during a lot of it. So that was cool, although it could have, it seems like it got drizzly from time to time, but it was cold. And but it was still a pretty good turnout, obviously. A very dedicated group of people there for that issue. And I enjoyed it. I like the energy there. That's all part of this whole process. And so you guys have been doing a really good job. And just want to touch on that a little bit today. And and you also introduce yourself. I know you're kind of like taking more of a leadership role in this whole movement and what's going on and stuff like that, so we can get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Jamie. So I'm Brittany. Hello. Hi, everybody. I started working with this space starting in Dance Safe, which is a harm reduction organization that works in the music and festival spaces doing drug education services, drug checking and fentanyl testing services. So that's kind of how I got involved in harm reduction. And it only makes sense to me that, if we're reducing the harms for something that's currently criminalized and the criminalization is causing those harms, it only makes sense to, get involved in the drug policy side of everything too. So I started working with Decriminalize Nature Michigan when they initiated the ballot Senate Bill 613, I believe it is. And I was collecting signatures last year for that. And then the Michigan Initiative for Community Healing was born once this thing got a lot bigger than, just the organizations who started it. So MISH really is the, egg nest of all of those orgs and all of the love and passion and time and energy that all of those volunteers have put in. And it's now its own entity that has committees and a board and and then also I'm secretary for Michigan Initiative for Community Healing, as well as the design lead. So all of the branding and logo stuff, I'm kind of organizing the team behind that.
Right on. Nice that there's some energy I mean, there has been all along, but these efforts require, many people stepping up from time to time. And I know that Julie's done quite a bit. Julie Barron, been on the show many times, good friend of ours, and still will continue to do a lot. But certainly, more the merrier, and the more help and the more insertion of support, the better. So appreciate your taking on such a heavy role with this, and glad you have such a passion for it.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you.
So just I guess before we go, let us know about the rally today. Like, what was that about? How did it go for you? The obvious stuff notwithstanding.
It was great. It was absolutely great. To my knowledge, it had about the same turnout as last week's rally, which was the Cannabis Caregivers Rally. And they had a lot better weather last week. So I would say that's a complete win to match the turnout, even with, not perfect weather. The amount of people there who just showed so much dedication, passion, excitement, enthusiasm for this whole movement is just really, really exciting to see. We had Michigan Initiative for Community Healing, Decriminalize Michigan, Dance Safe, as well as Michigan Psychedelic Society there, so Julie's organization. So we had all of them there, kind of all the volunteers working with one another and collaborating and just bringing the community together, not just for one specific organization, but for this whole cause in general. But it was great. It was so great. Amazing people. I wouldn't trade this space for anything.
Quite awesome. Yeah, and this group has been really effective and really organized, and it's been impressive. And all of us will continue to work with you and support you, and try to push this forward. And of course, cannabis still needs help too, and we're all in this together. So really appreciate it, and keep us informed. I'm sure we'll have you back on. We'll see if Mike makes it back around. But thanks for introducing yourself, and thanks for all the work that you've done. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to get back to the party, though, if that's okay.
Yeah. Tell everybody we said hi, please.
We'll certainly do. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day, all right?
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
That is a really cool shirt she had on. That hallucinogenic plants shirt that had all the different things on it.
Yeah, I guess we should have highlighted that for a second, but
I blanked on it. But yeah, I would buy one of those.
Makes sense. And Dance Safe is a really cool organization, and I think we've talked about them here before, but we'll get to that again at some point. But
they go to raves and give people testing for their drugs that they're about to take before they put it in their system to make sure that it's safe. You're talking about going to raves and other dance parties. That's getting right to the root of the problem.
Yep.
Important service, yeah.
People are going to do them anyway. You might as well keep them alive, right? I remember going to shows back in the day, a lot of Fish and Grateful Dead shows, a lot of festivals, where it was not uncommon for a couple people to come out of that space not alive. Yeah. Because of the hydration and the heat, and then obviously the amount of fun that they consumed, and it was just a bad situation. So I actually remember seeing a group like that for my first time. It was the first Bonnaroo festival, and it was kind of a weird thing to see, because you're like, oh my god, I'm not gonna take my drugs for these people. I don't live with cops or something, But I think that's an awesome situation. I think they should have them on every corner. Testing labs for cannabis and testing labs for drugs.
There's a program out there in Michigan where people can get, what is it, methadone in little boxes, Jamie, like outside of
Narcan.
My apologies, methadone. No, Narcan. Yeah. Narcan. It's an overdose medicine. So if anyone's freaking out, you just you give it to them, and then they chill right down. And that's just another one of those efforts being put out there to recognize there's a problem, and we have non-governmental ways to solve it, right? Dance Safe, Narcan boxes. This is not the government, giving us permission to take care of our own people. We're taking care of our own people. Fuck it.
Right on. Red Setter weighing in. He cares a lot about the harm reduction.
Turn this off for a minute.
Movement and discussion. And put this back on, because yes, I believe that we'll talk about the TUI raids a little bit. I also want to talk about the veteran funding issue. We've covered that quite a bit, and there's now been some movement in that. I mentioned on the title of today's show that we would be getting to the bills that concern the incorporating like Native American businesses in Michigan into the metric system and the taxation and stuff like that. And I was reading about that. I know some people like it, some people don't. Rep Robbie, who we like, is one of the people. And when I started reading about it, I came across something that was disturbing, and I want to bring that up as well. And so I think we got some interesting stuff here to talk about today, and some things we're concerned about, and some things where I think so far so good on the effort. And so but why don't we talk about that now and have maybe a discussion where we lead to a positive outcome, at least what certainly appears like that, and then we'll get into some of the other stuff, because they'll probably get a little more concerning on some level. But we've been following. The MRTMA has created a vehicle for the first $20 million for 2 years to go to research to fund PTSD research for veterans to help prevent suicides. And there was an issue over if the money was being put toward the right standard of study, which has to be FDA approved, and that was necessary and important to the veterans, so that the Veteran Administration would have something strong enough to change policy with, to open up more use of cannabis for veterans. And so there were a series of meetings and contacting people at the department and bringing in other people and the recipients of the funds and all that kind of stuff, spearheaded by Anton. Anton, take it from there and let us know what happened.
Oh boy, that was a complicated one, guys. Yeah, Jamie, I mean, you really rehashed the whole thing pretty well. We've spoken about it several times in several forums, and the big issue for me and everyone involved was the fact, like you said, that the standard of study that had been approved may not have been within the confines of what the MRTMA mandated. So yeah, as a community, as advocates, we had gotten together and we approached CRA and made our concerns known. And it's not too often where the system works. And I'll say that I'm happy to report in this particular case, it appears that the system did work, that the problem was solved, and it was solved without going to war with each other. And I'll kind of elaborate a little bit on that. So when we brought this issue to CRA, I mean, we also brought this issue to lawmakers in the House, in the Senate, Republicans, Democrats. We took it to the AG. We took it to the governor. We made this issue very known, is openly known as we possibly could, for the simple fact that, we wanted the system to work. We didn't want to have to go to court. We didn't want to have to go to war, right? We identified a problem. We, as a community, we spoke about it. We had all these meetings with not only the academic institutions, but the government officials. And, at the end of the day, for us as the advocates, the only thing we were really looking for is for everybody to be in compliance with the law, right? We weren't being critical of the particular study designs that the academic institutions were trying to, that's their purview, right? As long as what they're doing is within the confines of the law. And, I'm happy to report I've met with the CRA, it was last Friday, and CRA did a lot of behind the scenes work. They really did listen to our concerns, and they took our concerns back to the academic institutions, because, I don't think people realize how complicated these research designs and what goes into this process really is. And it's extremely complicated, especially when you're talking about bringing an FDA and DEA and state government and federal government and trying to get everybody to play nice. So CRA did a lot of behind the scenes work. They worked with U of M and they worked with Wayne State, and they were kind of the go-between between the advocates and everybody, because at the end of the day, this all kind of falls on their lap. This was their regulatory authority that they were mandated through the law to carry out. And, I think all of our concerns at this point have been addressed. At least that's the resolution that we've reached currently. Basically, per CRA. They told me that U of M, one of the issues we had with U of M study was that they were proposing to do a CBD study, but their study drug was to be derived from industrial hemp. And the MRTMA mandates that the researchers have to study the efficacy of marijuana, which we all know to be different than the standards of what industrial hemp is. So that was my first issue that I had brought to them. And according to CRA, U of M has agreed to import marijuana, federally approved, NIDA, FDA approved marijuana from the Netherlands, which is perfectly okay to do. I don't think people realize that there is the capacity for marijuana to be imported from Canada, the Netherlands. I believe Israel may be a third, on top of one of the 7 NIDA approved federal growers that we have in the U.S.
And they are trying to increase that volume of available material for people to do testing with because of the increased
right. And I mean,
amount of people who wanted to test these things.
With the researchers I've spoken to, just the quality of product from Canada, for example, it just seems to be better. So that's kind of what some researchers have fallen back to is just importing it through the federally legal channels.
It's cool that those other options are available.
Yeah, right. So, and that's cool, right? So, whether they decide to continue doing a CBD study or whatever, that's neither here nor there. As long as the study drug that they're using is in compliance with the law, totally cool, right? Like they're U of M. I think that they're some of the greatest research minds in the world. Let's give them that opportunity to see what they find. The other issue U of M has apparently agreed to per CRA is to abandon the observational portion of their study. The big problem was that we had MRTMA grant dollars that were supposed to go towards clinical FDA trials going towards observational trials, which are not clinical trials by definition. So we just wanted to make sure that at least if the grant dollars that had been allocated to these institutions were going towards the proper RFP study design. So that was with U of M, as I was advised. And as far as Wayne State goes, one of the issues we had was Wayne State. They were having problems securing enough what they claimed a study drug from a NIDA approved grower to get FDA approved the clinical trial going, right?
RFD research funding plan, just so people know. It's you're submitting your plan to
it's the study, the design, basically the plan of what you're going to submit and tell FDA to get approved of what you're going to do throughout your research study. Wayne State has apparently agreed to abandon their observational study. There was a Michigan licensee who they had apparently hooked up with to help veterans or supply veterans with cannabis, and that is no more. That I had a huge.
And then they would just get responses from them as to what happened.
Yeah,
that would be the basis of the data collecting. It wouldn't be the interactive thing that is
right. At the end of the day, look, I contend at the end of the day, these folks were trying to work within the confines of what they had, but they were skirting around FDA, their whole thing. And it was intentional. Like, I believe that but not with malice, right? I believe they were trying to conduct the research to the best of their ability, and they seen that there was an easier path, but unfortunately the law didn't allow for that. Right. So we brought that issue up, and now they are agreeing to come into compliance with the law. No Michigan, there's no Michigan cannabis licensee involvement that's going to be involved, I've been assured. And interestingly enough, CRA also appears to have clarified their rule of when a Michigan licensee can be involved with a research study. And I believe the wording was that the licensee can work with a researcher who has been duly authorized by the DEA, which currently, if a researcher is duly authorized by DEA, there'd be no way that a licensee could work with them anyways because of the federal limitations. But, the licensee would have to submit a research plan, and there's controls, right? There was some regulatory oversight that they had clarified within that rule. So I thought that was pretty cool. And Wayne State is actually, from what I heard, they're actually helping out. They're liaisoning with U of M, and they're helping each other. This is kind of a novel process in our country, right? So I think it's kind of cool. as long as the FDA is involved and there is the traditional process of doing this type of research, as long as that's being done and it's an interventional study, cool, right? And CRA has also agreed we're going to have quarterly meetings, which were big because for me, my thing was we want to make sure we have oversight over this money. $40 million,
That's what I
a
was
lot
going
of
to
money.
ask. I was like, is there an oversight group or something? I mean, it seems like they would have them over all, especially that much money.
Yeah, right. So 40 and look, they and CRA was great about, and I throw that out there. They were great about listening to the concerns. And when we brought this to them, the financials, we want to look at the financials that where's this money going, right? We want to be able to look at the study designs. We want to be able to question these institutions to make sure our veterans are being taken care of in the way that the law mandates, right? So we will be doing quarterly meetings with stakeholder veterans. We're going to have a grant expert on there. So we'll have these different stakeholders involved, and on a quarterly basis, we'll be able to get the institutions submit quarterly reports to CRA, basically status reports, where they're at within the confines of.
Yeah, Anton, do you know how much data they're going to provide on these studies, at least to the public? And I was curious just because of 5512 was the issue we ran into that with drug courts. So I was just kind of curious, like, what is
as far as that? Look, I don't know what the how often they're going to release. I don't know if the data is released at the end. This is a 5-year study, right? So I don't know if the data will be released at the end. But I will say the progress of what they're doing will be overseen, and we'll be able to look at the status of how many veterans they have enrolled. What the general gist is, a picture of what they're doing, where the money is going, and we'll do that on a quarterly basis. And that made me feel good because they want to be transparent, right? And I think that's important. And and really, like I said, I gave kudos to CRA because it's rare, I think, in government that we see an issue of this magnitude. I don't think people realize the magnitude of this issue. Because this went way beyond veterans. This goes way beyond.
Like, how many other times have they done this? Like, how many other issues has this issue already happened in other circumstances and just not been caught yet?
Well, you're right. We don't know, but this was an example of the right thing being done, right? Like, this went, the governor. I know the governor was watching this in the background. Of course, we all know, and my thing was that it was cool. That speaks a lot to hopefully, Governor Whitmer, if you're listening, thank you. We appreciate this. The veterans appreciate this. This wasn't a partisan thing. This was bipartisan. We had support from the Republicans, the Democrats. We had the CRA, even the institutions. At the end of the day, I believe have always wanted to see the right thing done by the veterans. Right? This was a new process. This was something that really hasn't done. There's been no scenario that we can find in the history of the country where $40 million has been set aside for PTSD research with cancer. This hasn't happened before, right? I believe the most we found was like $2 million. So with this amount of money, this is life-changing research that could happen not only to change the lives of veterans, but change the life, at a national level.
You imagine a VA hospital in a state that's been strictly like one of the last holdout states that's been like totally against this. That hospital in that state could conceivably start being okay with,
And I'll say this too, like there have always been different perspectives and arguments to this issue, right? The way that I seen things may not be the way that CRA seen things, and may not be the way that U of M seen things, may not be the way that the lawmakers, right? There's all these different varying perspectives in the way that we digested the issue. But at the end of the day, we all arrived at a satisfactory resolution, which I think says a lot. The way I present the problem may not be the way they seen it, but they heard what we had to say, and they recognized that there were validity to the issues that we were bringing to them, and they worked to resolve it. So, I mean, I don't really, it was a huge win. I think it wasn't just a win for the cannabis community. It was a win for all Michiganders because we were the ones that put this whole law into place. So I think it's kind of cool.
We have to believe that the people still have the opportunity to petition government for the redress of grievances. And this is an example of petitioning the government for the redress of grievances. And although it could have gone to the courts, it could have gone different ways, conversation conversation, not litigation. Conversation solved it. And that's a lesson we should all learn, that
Yes,
it's much
sir.
easier to talk out our problems than it is to fight out our problems.
100%. The fact that we were able to sit down at the end of the day, it was 3 dudes sitting there. We just had a conversation. They did their background and research. We all did our research. We sat at a table and we just talked about it. And I'll tell you, my limited the interactions I've had with Director Hannah, he was cool as shit. I'll tell you that. Like, if he's listening, thank you again. These as a veteran himself, it was cool to be able to have that conversation. He was an officer as well, right? So we had that kind of bond there that we want to do not only what's right for the cannabis community, but the veterans. And we had that bond, and every concern that I had, I felt was listened to. Sometimes when you speak to bureaucrats, you feel blown off, right? You can tell they're just kind of blowing smoke up your ass. And I hate that feeling, but these were folks that really want to do good. And I thanked them for that because, we may not always agree on every issue, right? And we may not totally agree on how this issue went, right? But it was solved. And I remain cautiously optimistic, right? Because now that we have this resolution in place, the things that we spoke about need to transpire, right? So I've been assured over the next, not right now, so we have 4 to 6 weeks, they said. So by hopefully the middle of November, we'll have had our first quarterly meeting. The institutions will have submitted their financial information, and the ball will get rolling because one of the things that we agreed on, CRA and myself was like, well, we need to see something in writing, right? We want to know that the institute, what exactly are they going to do to change their study designs so we're comfortable that this is within, if they are indeed going to do this, there should be no problem putting it in writing and showing that information to us. So, I've been assured the first quarterly meeting will be able to, that progress report that they submit should have the amendments that they're making to their study designs. And we should all be able to leave that meeting comfortable, that is transparency. When you can have government and you can have the grantees and you can have regular old nobody me, who's I still maintain I'm a nobody. And I like that because I have the only position I take in this, and the only thing I get in return out of all of this is my veterans, my fellow brothers and sisters have been done right. And that's, and
that's what makes you the man, though. See,
Yeah,
because that's your motive.
That's my motive. That is really, truly, and I think
the man.
I think from a credit, and the one thing I've tried to maintain through this whole thing is credibility, right? I could have went in there and, mother fucked them up and down, and they would have hung the phone up on me, right? and really, for me, this was kind of a master's class in diplomacy, right? How do you take all these different folks, all these different perspectives, and bring them together to where we don't have to go to war with each other? And as of right now, it worked. As long as everything that I've been told it gets implemented, I think we should all, when there's an issue, this should be brought to light, and we can all remember, hey, it doesn't get much more complicated than this. You're dealing with bureaucrats at all levels. You're dealing with some of the most powerful academic institutions on the planet, and we were all able to come to an understanding. So, I think it's a cool feeling.
The truth and the very clear language in the law is definitely on your side when walking into those conversations.
Boy, that always helps, doesn't it? Acting Director Hannah will be a guest on my show tomorrow at 420 Post.
And on Anton's show, I was going to just
coming on Monday. Yeah, he's coming
on Monday too. Yep.
Yeah,
so those people who have not had a chance to meet, or at least to speak to or see the director, listen to him speak. Here's a couple of great opportunities where you can sit at home and get a good feel for what this guy is and what he has to say.
Cool. Good
Latrish, I know you were going to say something.
Oh, I'll be watching. I'll be watching. Oh no, actually, I was just kind of curious too. Like, do you think that the change of director had an influence too, as well, on achieving what you've got to the point where you're at right now?
Personally, I think so.
I think so too. Just for record.
Personally,
cool.
former director Brisboe, we interacted all the time, and he was a great dude. I don't know, I can't put my finger on what, but when I sat at the table and looked Director Hannah in the eye, and we were able to talk about where we were stationed and overseas, and he had a passion, he had a connection to the vets, right? So he was personally vested, and Director Brisboe was as well.
I gave Director Brisboe possibly demonstrating that he was on the path to realizing that there needed to be some casualties by the time he left. It wasn't like he was being, totally, defiant or anything about this.
There was no malice. There was no malice. Like, if there was some bullshit going on, I would have called it out, right? If there's one thing people know about me, it's I am a bullshit. Like, I will find it and I will call it out. And that's just how I roll, right? And at no point was there malice or any type of bullshit going on. These were just folks who were tasked with something that they have never been tasked with before, and they did the best that they could. And you know what? I mean, that's what we're here for. It's guys like us. We're all there to identify issues and bring them to them and fix things. There's no shame. And I don't even say that they were wrong. I say they did the best with what they had, and we made it better, right? And that, to me, it sounds more positive. And I told them I wanted kumbaya at the end of this, right? And kumbaya appears to be what we got, right? So I can't complain.
Tony, we might segue into the 2-week conversation. I'm not sure how long it'll be.
Let Trish get it, man. I'm
Trish, sorry, Trish.
No, you're okay. I was responding to Tony. I was just trying to break in there. I read what she had written there about 2-week situation.
Yep. The question, because some of our audio only subscribers on Alexa and Spotify might not be able to read this. Tony Shenaniquet writes, do you think that the raid on Michael Toohey had to do with the new director as well? My answer is no, because it's a completely different division of government.
When they say enforcement, they mean something else. From within the
division that they've got going on is just that was them. It wasn't the CRA at all.
Right. The enforcement division has a different kind of, it doesn't mean that it takes on the role of police. It has to do with like making sure the regulations and the rules are being followed, and the compliance and that type of stuff for the commercial licensees.
Just not a pattern. There's a big pattern of enforcement issues I see for the last couple of months. So I was also curious about that too.
I'll say that. Go ahead, Alicia.
No, I did realize when you guys were at the dinner for the MICIA, I was listening to some of the director's speech or whatnot, and he had said that he was going to be more involved in enforcement, and then I was just kind of curious what that meant.
Well, the enforcement for the CRA is on licensees, not on someone like Michael Toohey, who doesn't have a license anywhere. So any enforcement on him would have to come either from the Michigan State Police, for the local cops, or from this new marijuana, tobacco, and enforcement thing. I have a feeling, knowing Michael and knowing the history of himself in that area, that this was more locally generated than anything else. Michael ruffles feathers, and he's also very upfront with showing pictures of his cultivation center. None of this justifies a SWAT style raid with weapons drawn.
No. And it was this new department.
Hang on. But the fact is, this probably was generated more locally as opposed to from Lansing because of all of his history there. I'm sorry, thanks. I just had to finish.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but it was this new department, the tobacco and cannabis, whatever they're called now, that performed the raid. And what they said was that somebody went in there and did their thing, and then called into the department when they said they didn't think it seemed like it was a licensed place. And that's what they say, and triggered the investigation. So Dewey came on Medical Mondays last night, and Camorn came on during it.
That's a good show, by the way.
And so some of the highlights are, if you read the article, it seemed like Dewey's a felon. And if you read that article, there were like guns found there and stuff. And so he explained that. I guess he has already on social media too, but he explained it last night as his roommates. They were in cases. They were in a closet. They weren't loaded. They weren't like out and ready for action or anything like that. They were registered to his roommate. They they're not connected to any other issues. The police said they were going to give it back to his roommate. So, I mean, that was kind of scary if that was a part of it. I mean, Adam's not here, but that's part of his story as to why he went to jail after a raid. And it's also, you know, kind of Michael Thompson's story too. So those things are scary. And I really hope that that's the case. They took his tractor. And we have some laws about civil assets forfeiture that have changed recently. There has to be like a value thing assessed to it. There also now has to be a conviction. And neither one of those things were the case. You know, they took his tractor. So there's been no charges. You imagine you start going after the tractor, then start loading on charges. You know, I mean, that's how they work. That's their
pick it off. They just want to make sure you never heard it again.
Yeah,
When we got raided, that they didn't issue charges for 6 months. That's
right.
That's how it happens. They raid you, they find what they want, they build a case against you, and then they charge you out of the blue one day when you're not even.
And that's also after getting lab tests back that the stuff that they have in possession is actually cannabis.
Yeah, you can't charge on a maybe. You have to have certainty.
This
Sounds
is
like they're getting in the same position as John Sinclair was. You know, finding a reason to get him. You know what I mean?
It's like Lapeer County.
So what Rick says is true. He's been through a lot there. There's very good reason that somebody could have decided that they wanted to target him and use some little reason to really go nuts on him. You know, he's got a history. You know, there's a lot of things that line up. If you're not, and you know, he was working with the MMMA, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, you know, from his side of the story. And I'd be surprised if the police even really understand it or think about it as a thing anymore, you know. And he said he heard people talking about how, oh, people don't follow that shit anymore, like just dismissing it. It's a thing. But they go to charge him, I mean, they're going to find out it's a thing. Yeah. But I don't know if they're going to do something. What they talked about last night was possibly doing something preemptively, like with the tractor and that kind of stuff, or, you know, kind of seeing how far they want to take it. So it's a fucked up situation, man. And again, you know, Rick brought it up also before, talked about last night, fucking cops going in with guns and shit like that. Not necessary for, you know, there being some plants hanging around.
You know, I can see if the firearms registry says there are 12 long guns at this particular residence, I can see a need for some kind of caution. I can't see a need for already guns out. You know, there are surveillance methods that can be used to determine who's there, what's there, in what room they are, things like that. So nobody wants to put, you know.
And where was the threat? You know what I mean? That's just the thing too, Rick. It's like, where was the threat? At the end of the day, there was no threat. You can't have, you know, you can't have a crime. There has to be a victim, right? There's always been that.
They don't give a shit about they've been using like low-level cannabis activity as a reason to plow in, guns ablazing, killing dogs, pointing guns at kids' heads.
Welcome back to 2011. This is
so there's been some law changes and there's been less of that, but here we go again. You know, I mean, so and Tony's asking about what do you charge? So what they're saying, so I mean, so far, who knows? Ultimately, you know, probably conspiracy, this and that, but they're saying that he's in violation of the MRTMA, you know, and then they're gonna, you know, ultimately talk about how they were actually working under the MMMA, you know. So
the CCE charge, that's the one, the continuing criminal enterprise. That was just in the news report that they had listed that on the warrant. And
right, and by virtue of the fact that it's the MRTMA that they're you know working with, means that a new lens, all the stuff had to be seen under a different view starting December 2018. His previous record with that stuff and how this might pile on is different. They ignore that, but it's supposed to be different. Somebody like Amor is, you know, would have to argue that if that, you know, is the
unfortunately, this is where a lot of our good decisions come from, is bad, shitty cases like this. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, Tui's original case where we got the right for people to be able to use cannabis on probation and everything, that was a shitty case, but unfortunately, we fought through the courts and got a resolution to it. It really sucks that someone has to be hugely disadvantaged and potentially jailed in order for us to get good law to be made. But what's worse is that there's no way to notify everybody about it. In the early days, Jamie knows this. In the early
good enough reason for them to target him right there, by the way. I guess we should have thought about that. The Tui decision has pissed off a lot of judges and a lot of prosecutors and shit.
But in the early days, the Michigan State Police, every time there was a new court case, every time there was a new development which provided additional guidance as to how to interpret the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, the MSP would send something out. Now, we didn't always agree with what they said, but they were regularly informing all of law enforcement across the state at exactly the same time what the new deal was. Now they stopped that a long time ago. So you have this uneven level of enforcement where maybe they're really down with the law in Ann Arbor, but maybe they're not in Lenawee. You know, it provides an uneven surface for cannabis consumers in Michigan, and certainly an uncertain place for us to enjoy our medicine or our recreational herb.
You know, and that was a situation before there was statewide recognition of things, before there were further laws, you know, and it was where you were, you know, piecemeal. If you were in Washtenaw County, you were in better shape than if you were in Oakland County, you know, as far as risk for attack, as you know, Rick unfortunately knows.
Yeah. Well, you can talk about what's that stretch of 75. What do we call that horrible piece there where everybody gets busted, Jamie?
The gauntlet up north.
Gauntlet. Yeah, correct. Yes. You know, you're talking about a situation where one county is completely different than another. In this county, they care about this. County up north, they don't care about this. But this county, they care about this.
We're like, this is bullshit, you know, whatever on this. They're like, well, you know, this county they charge for it. If you were up in Wexford or whatever the next, I'm not sure what it was, but Roscommon or whatever these counties are up there. I'm not sure exactly where we were, quite honestly, but that county they don't care about this. Here we try to charge for it.
Yep. So that's why a guy like Toohey is doubly damned. First of all, because he's just being who he is. He's helping people. Let's break this down. Michael Toohey helps people. He also has a certification center for medical marijuana cards. He does a lot of good things to the community. There's a lot of people in the Traverse City area that can say great things about Michael. All right. But he's doubly damned because he's a bold character, and they play the game a little bit differently in his neck of the woods. It's not as liberal as it is down here in the further south. So he's hurt by his geography, by his address, more than anything else. Most of they wouldn't care.
That Kamorn brought up last night is like, it's not always the case, but typically, since it was this particular department that did the enforcement, instead of the county prosecutor, the attorney general's office usually is the prosecutor.
Yeah,
in these cases, and he just wonders if Dana's really going to, you know, prosecute with these set of circumstances here. I mean, he's fucked. If he's not a hardcore criminal as they suspected him to be, they wiped out his garden. They, you know, threw him in the back of his car for 5 hours and questioned him or whatever. I mean, whatever they did was unnecessary, however far it went.
Well, remember, according to one of the news articles, there was quite a little garden of, I guess, peyote buttons, peyote plants.
There was a cacti, that was Doc Deadhead's.
Yeah.
And so were the mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to factor in, whether they're going to try and use that because it was on the property to determine, CCE and criminal enterprise, because to us, that could be a year's worth of personal use, but to someone else from outside of our world, that looks like manufacture and distribution.
So, Doc Deadhead is, you know, from what I understand anyway, maybe some more details need to come out. That was his personal medicine. He does the native church involvement, and that hasn't worked for when people have tried to sell it and stuff, but for possession and use for religious expression has worked. And that's what all he was claiming it was. He was in possession of it for religious purposes. So, and Doc Deadhead is saying it was his. They believed the guns were his. Why, you know, I mean, just hope that this is separate from ultimately Toohey's case. But you're right. We don't know how all this stuff is going to.
Hopefully they're registered and that will prove it itself.
Yeah. There are enough little thorns here to be able to snag a sweater. You know, there's a way that they can get to you if they want to get to you. Let's talk by the way, about the way that this was brought about. They claim somebody came to Toohey's place, made some kind of a purchase, then called them and said, "Hey, guess what I just did? I committed a criminal act." Stupid. What?
Well, if they're a patient, they get it anywhere as long as it's under 2.5 ounces.
Yeah, but my point is that this looks to me more like someone made a CI buy.
I think it's all bullshit. I think he was
civilian informant buy. They didn't register it, so they just claim it was a tip. You know. I need to know more about the way that this was derived, because it seems like, you know, somebody says, go get them and we'll make up a reason for it later. That's what this seems like.
They say they get a warrant based on that call, and then they send the CI or the undercover or whatever in, and then they do the transfer.
Ask for forgiveness later, like they usually get.
Yeah,
You'd have to look at the affidavit. And
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. The court could have sealed it, and then but Camoran will be able to get all that stuff eventually. But that's going to tell you until you see the affidavit. That's going to really spell things out for you. But we don't have all the facts. I'm just looking at what I seen in the media. But
No, in fact, I was listening to Rick here a minute ago, and he goes, "That's how they get you." And I just received a text message from Amy Carter, and I've been noticing this a lot lately. I don't know if you guys have, but there's a lot of medical bullying going on right now too. There's a lot of the cannabis use disorder flying around a lot lately, like a lot. Like it's a lot. Right now I am doing some research on.
So Amy's got a background with that story too, real quick. She had a long time psychiatrist and connected with her son, who we all know her son's a pediatric patient, which helped to spur, Amy to work with Rep. Garza and others to get a bill introduced that would allow pediatric use of medical cannabis, non-smokable forms, while on school grounds. So the fiasco of having to drive 1,000 feet away, walk up, make a spectacle out of her son, take him out of school, walk the 1,000 feet back, administer the so forth, and all that kind of stuff. And after so long of making progress and having this psychiatrist and stuff, he leaves to do something else, and a new one comes in, and instead of I guess being open to the idea that this has been something that has really been positive for her son for many years and all the other stuff that's attached to it, he immediately goes, okay, THC abuse or cannabis abuse or something like that, and throws a wrench in a lot of years of some good stuff. So just to back up what you
the experiences that all the previous counselors and psychiatrists and things like that, they've had a lot of years to be able to really dig deep into his story and be able to work with him, and obviously are able to identify that cannabis has been a positive thing. I don't want to speak too much for Amy on her story, but it has been a benefit, and it has been also something that now all of a sudden you're running into doctors just throwing that out everywhere, and it's almost like alcoholism, right? So if you have 3 or 4 drinks and you get a DUI, you're an alcoholic now, right? I guess that's a crappy comparison, but what I'm saying is that how much research
you blow it out of proportion from a small thing. That's
right.
Idea.
Right, but I mean, how much research has been done on this? Because what I've found is that the studies on it haven't been able to prove that isn't a thing that exists, because if it did, then what happened for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 to 2,500 years, where people were consuming cannabis every day, all day long? Jamaica would be screwed, So I'm curious of why is this something that's coming out now? And I see a lot of this coming down the line from doctors who obviously have big hands in pharmaceuticals and whatnot too.
Yeah, trying to push further restrictions that help to benefit certain people. Trying to push them. So that's what follow the money when these illogical things are going on. That's somebody's deviously trying to position themselves to siphon what they can off of this.
And it's a medical profession that doesn't understand cannabis, and so is trying to shoehorn what we do into the world that they already know. And that means anytime they see a change in behavior or a change in state at all, they want to call it a disorder, because that's how they categorize things. They just don't think outside the box.
Gives them something to treat and make money out of.
Exactly right. So
I'm taking the liberty to contact a few people actually in that situation, and I'm going to set up a meeting with them. And I did a little bit of research on a few people as well. I'm not going to say names or anything like that, but the fact is that just researching alone on somebody who has the ability or the power to make that decision, it's good to know if they even have the ability or have the education or knowledge behind whether they should or they shouldn't. I'm seeing a lot of people use this in a very abusive way. I see it as medical bullying. The doctors don't like to hear that you want to make your own choices in a lot of spaces. And this is a good way to criminalize somebody, again, for not, following what the doctor wants them to do, which is a really strange power to have, but it's It's a thing.
What's the penalty though? It's like say, okay, well, fuck you. Okay, cannabis, whatever disorder. What is that? I mean, it
It's
has
not
certain
for pediatric
ramifications.
patients, though. When a doctor
Yeah.
just throws out for a pediatric patient that's been using cannabis for years and years and years, and now they're like, nope, you got to turn it off. That is insane. Without being able to have a study on that alone, too.
Well, why don't you just say
Healthcare-
no, we're not
Healthcare
coming
providers
back?
can disallow you from coverage too if they think you have a cannabis use disorder. You can lose all kinds of protections in healthcare and others.
Yeah,
Well, and that's insane. It's crazy to think about what that's going to do for people on their insurance and stuff like that, too. So just food for thought. It's like, yeah, they really are coming after people that way. It's crazy.
Well, and to go back to the Tui case, you're looking at almost a similar situation here where they're trying to shoehorn Tui's behavior into a definition of legal that they have on the street. But we all know, because we've lived this life, that the courts have decided there's a different definition of legal, one that they have apparently not gotten a hold of yet. Especially some of the things that Michael told me that the police said to him on scene.
We're talking about it right now, Brad.
Yep. Yeah, talking about it right now. And it once again demonstrates a disconnect with what's already happened. And there's no public support for bullying cannabis patients. Hemp doesn't hurt. Hemp don't hurt. Let it be. Why would they raid a hemp farm?
Healers, not dealers.
I know. But we look at this though, and we say, Michael got ripped. We wonder what's going to happen. Who's next? That's
man. So I mean, there's probably a connection here with some of the other stuff we want to talk about today, in terms of how do the police continue to do this? How does this department continue to do stuff like this and enforce things concerning the MRTMA? And today we were planning on having Mark and Tony join us again. They were on a few weeks ago. Shenaniquet. Tony's watching and chiming in on comments and stuff, and they're very heavily involved in the Grand Traverse ban and what goes on there, and of course cannabis, and there are some bills that have passed that have to do with tying in businesses, these tribal businesses, with the metric system and taxation and stuff, products made in those places being able to come out of the markets at large, and I'm assuming vice versa. I mean, I went to go check this out. I know that some of the people take issue. They don't believe that their voice is at the table. Some of the bands don't think that this is heading in the right direction, and so this isn't like totally loved across the board. I talked to Robin about it a little bit. They kind of wanted to stay out of since it wasn't unanimous amidst all the tribes. They wanted to kind of stay out of negotiations between the state and so anyway, point being, I went to go kind of catch up on this and learn about it a little bit and try to have a better grasp for today's discussion. And the first thing that stood out to me in looking at one of the summaries was that there's a line that was slipped in that doesn't seem to be directly related at all, that would start funding the police for getting involved with MRTMA implementation and forth. There's a list of things. I should probably bring it up and read it because this is real. And I also want to say, at the end of last session, there was a move to try to combine licenses, and in that they tried to slip in something about working with the Native Americans and also some funding issues to the police. And both of those things were like, what's going on with those things? One of the reasons the concept of combining licenses isn't necessarily horrible, but the devil's always in the details. And that's another time that we were not included in on a conversation where many people, many stakeholders, more eyes on this could look at what goes on when there's going to be a change in the law and kind of make sure that the integrity, the things that we take stake in, the reasons that we've changed things, the intentions when getting started, those types of things don't get lost. And, all of these things are another instance of many of us not being involved in just the discussion and being able to weigh in. And now we're reactionary again. And so I'm going to read what it says. I'm sorry. At the end of, last session, it was tried. And it seems like couching it under this Native American bill is a time where it's going to try it again. And so what the bill would do, according to the summation by the LSB, is allow the Department of State Police to recover its costs from the CRA for assisting the CRA with implementing, administering, or enforcing the act. That's it. House Bill 5706. There's no context. There's no limitations. There's no like reimburse for what, how much. Is there a cap on anything? And the act is the MRTMA. So that potentially means enforcement against a wide range of things.
First of all, the Michigan State Police is supposed to assist the CRA. It's their job.
And they also save a lot of money from the legalization that we've already done. And there's already resources that don't have to be used toward this type of enforcement because we've already legalized.
The only source of income that the CRA has is from licensees. And I can tell you there's a ton of licensees out there that will not like to hear that their money that they pay every single year is going to fund the police, is going to fund the state police to go to actually to have a financial incentive now to police native reservations. I can't imagine the natives are going to be excited to hear that every hour logged by a Michigan State police officer on their reservation is going to be paid for by the state of Michigan. And therefore, they're going to spend a lot of time on that res because they need that payback check.
Maybe they wouldn't take Tui's tractor. They would know that if went to go do this, they submit a bill to the CRA.
I didn't understand that.
There was just a raid on Tui that cost money, and the police claimed that they did that because they thought he was in violation of the MRTMA. They would be able to recoup these funds, to be reimbursed for these funds for that enforcement.
Maybe what's that bill number again?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you.
5706, House Bill 5706. So, and Tony's chiming in about, more of the specific stuff that has to do with the tribes and the metric stuff and some of the issues, that might be there and what the bills are about, further into their purpose and things like that. And I agree with that. But that line, that change in law is a lot more broad. And I don't even know how it pertains necessarily to this. What the state police would be doing in the implementation of bridging the gap with the native businesses and how they work with metric and stuff like that. What would they do anyway? Go onto the reservation and enforce stuff.
Sounds like an overtime grab. When you look at what can the CRA actually what would it be? I mean, maybe if CRA used an MSP lab for some reason, maybe there's lab fees, but most of the time that goes towards overtime, paying overtime, which kind of, for me, I guess, just initially hearing this when you kind of told me about this, Jamie, the issue I would have with that is that does what is the incentive there? Why, the CRA shouldn't have the ability to have any type of hired gun, so to speak, right? We need to maintain that line between the regulatory authority and the enforcement authority. While the two may work together and they may coincide on certain issues and cases, one should not intentionally be able to benefit the other. And when you offer things like overtime, I know this, having done the damn job, I can tell you that guys want to do it. Hey, if there's an overtime on the res, let's get some overtime, right? And that's just the reality. That's what happens. So I guess I don't know the context of what is going on here, but when I hear that reimburse, what can they possibly what's to be reimbursed? And usually that is man hours.
Because as Rick said, and as we've talked about before too, it's already their job. Police needed to show up and do ABC, fucking show
MSP,
up and do it.
Yeah.
CRA calls them and says, "We're going to go down to blah blah blah. Please meet us." Yes, sir.
Right, exactly. Why MSP pays their people, whatever. Why would CRA have to reimburse them? Again, unless CRA is consuming MSP resources via the state lab or something to that effect, where, okay, that might make sense. But I mean, there's no context.
If I think, Anton, if the CRA was ordering a specific testing, if the CRA was ordering a specific investigation, I could see where at that point it goes beyond a normal function of Michigan State Police and the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, and there might be some compensation there. But just to compensate them for showing up and to be there while the inspection goes on, or maybe to show up and snatch up duffel bags full of cannabis in a Detroit dispensary that just magically disappeared in 5 days,
And here's the thing too. Now, once something like that goes through, oh shit, now CRA can compensate MSP, right? Well, now guys, we have to put up a task force because we got there's a money potential there, right? So now they have a couple. Hey, the MSP, you're going to now be the reservation task force. Make sure after your 40 hours you log it and you bill CRA. Again, I'm just spitballing here.
Nope, that's exactly how it goes.
Yeah,
but I having experienced this and kind of seeing how things go.
Somebody's standing back and saying, $2 billion industry. How can we get some of that?
So we need to talk to the senators. This has already passed through the House last month. And this is one of the ones that needs supermajority. So I don't know how many, I think we need like 8 senators to say no. Everybody could do that. We can make some concerted effort. Our advocacy groups can work together. We've done this before. This is a big deal. And, we got to make a push. I don't know. It's pretty far down in the process again, and we're stuck reacting to it. And I kind of wish I was more on top of it.
But the bill sponsor wants the change, and I think that should be an important factor. The bill
sponsors Rep. Robbie, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't, I guess wasn't as concerned about it. When I brought it to his attention, though, he recognized it as a problem. So it's not like he wanted it. At least he didn't recognize the consequences or how broad it really was after I pointed it out to him. And he said, thanks for bringing this to my concern. Now we have to address this in the Senate. Let Jeff Irwin know about it, which of course I did. And I talked to him today because he was at the rally. And he says he's also reached out to the department to try to get some clarity and that type of thing. And I hope other people do that too. I know, Anton mentioned he might have an opportunity.
Yeah, that should be a topic for our consumer connection meeting. I'm just curious, what is the clarification? What is the reason? I guess we just don't have enough information, I guess, to comment.
And a good opportunity to tell them that this is really overreaching and that's got to get either taken out or scaled back or narrowed significantly.
This has been a continuing pattern since 2014, when we originally had a move to allow medical marijuana businesses.
Even
as soon
12.
as there's a tax base that's established, the Michigan State Police want funding for themselves to monitor us terrible weed guys. There's been moves over and over and over in order to fund things. In fact, even in 2012, the Walsh bills wanted to tap the marijuana fund, which is just from patient registration.
It created the fund. It actually created the special fund, took it out of the Department of Treasury at large,
and they wanted to tap it for cops, and we put a stop to that. But it's just been a history throughout the entire time of police officers and organizations trying to tap into our money.
So there's actually some of these tribes want to be involved so that they can take product made under their organization and sell it to the market at large. That's one of the reasons why these discussions are going on. What the details of the bills are, we haven't really talked about, but that is.
I'm curious, and I reached out, actually, Jamie, like I said afterwards, I reached out to one of my good buddies who's a veteran and also a tribal member, and he's kind of looking into the background as well, because I'm curious to what is the Native American tribes, what do they have to say about that? I mean, I would guess that if you said, hey, MSP could have an incentive to come onto your reservation, and I would guess that they'd say hell no. But maybe they do know about it. Maybe there's a good reason. I don't know. I guess this is in its infancy right now.
Well, Loom Cannabis is well known to have dispensaries on tribal properties, and they were the first, and they're the most prolific throughout the Upper Peninsula and Northern Lower. There are Loom properties on I think the Bay Mills. Tribal.
Yeah,
they haven't come through. They generally don't like them. I think they're trying to back away from any future agreements with them. I think they've worn out their welcome with at least some of these people.
I think that's true too,
as Mark would attest. And Mark is very involved with the Grand Traverse Band and really cares about
So having had that negative experience, it would make the tribal entities far more cautious about jumping into the MRA's bed, or the CRA's bed rather. Although, as Jamie mentioned, it's the only way to really make it living in Michigan, you can't just have only tribal business. It doesn't seem like that's a way for you to profit and to grow. So opening yourself up to the larger market,
they should be given every opportunity anyways. I mean,
Yep.
that should just be
should be their choice. Should be
we
their
talk
choice.
inclusion and equity. If there's any demographic of folks who we need to make sure has proper equitable access to whatever, it should be the Native Americans. Fucking period. I would think, in my, like, we need to make sure everybody's being included. And when we're fighting just now to bring these folks into the license system, why wasn't this done right from the get-go? I don't know. Maybe there's a good reason, but we need to make sure to do this right.
What's interesting is the deeper story. Rick had invited Whitney.
Yes, Whitney Gravel.
Yeah, it was the lawyer of Bay Mills, and now does even more.
She's now the executive director of the tribal council.
Right. And came on this show, and when they first were getting started, and essentially said, we tried to contact the state for a year. They just didn't return any of our calls trying to talk about this. So now we're going to do what we want to do.
Yeah. And that's really forced the CRA in order to move into action. Remember, as Jamie mentioned, the tribal entities aren't connected to the regulated supply chain. So how do they source their cannabis? They source their cannabis from caregivers or from their own personal grow. Now, I'm good with that. Cool.
Well, their own grows aren't going to satisfy their one or two stores. They'd like to have a place to,
Right. But the fact is that's not a sustainable model. And it's something that the CRA really has been trying to eliminate. So you can see where finally they got off their ass, but Jamie's right.
And some of these places, and people who have recognized that there haven't been, agreements carried out and followed through with, and so there's a lot of skepticism of this one being followed through, and I think there's certain players involved that are trying to advantage themselves as part of the issue or part of the controversy.
Anything that happens with government happens with advantage for somebody. The director's office doors are always open for people to come in, but oftentimes it's lobbyists and special interest groups that come in and have a seat, as opposed to real people who want to just come in and talk about what their concerns are and what their fears are and what their hopes perhaps are.
So they've been trying to slip this in, as we said too. So it's not necessarily a surprise, and it also does not mean that it's somehow narrowly attached just to the whatever needs to be done that has costs with police with this, potential agreement.
I think Anton had the right of it, though. First thing you do is you put a task force together. You put a Don Bailey on the task force, right? There's a name from our history. And then you decide at that point, how are we going to help the CRA? Well, let's be proactive since we can bill for it. Let's be proactive and develop a whole strategy. And it'll take about 6 months for us to make this handbook. And we're all going to do a bunch of research. And, this is how you soak somebody for bread. When you've got a full teat, you're just going to keep sucking.
How it works, man. And when I think of how can you fix that or change it, the answer is I don't think you can, because here's the deal. Unless you cut things off like these types of funding, I mean, the police, law enforcement, the criminal justice system, it works just like a corporation. They need dollars and cents to function and run and when we talk about like the police going out there and having quotas and all this other shit, that's a reality, right? Because the police have to go out and make cases. If they're not making cases, somebody's going to breathe down their neck and say, why aren't you doing your damn job, right?
And what that really means is that we don't need as many police.
Right.
Could be cutting down. And they'll always have the argument that, more is better. But that's fine. But the reality is there has to be an understanding, and all of that understanding is controlled by dollars and cents. Really, that's how you regulate the system. That's how you would fix the problem. You cut the funding, not defund, but at the same token, you don't have to, putting an incentive out there for enforcement that may not be necessary. It may be, I don't know, but that's kind of how it seems to work, right?
Well, they save money by not having to do it.
If you can't find crime, you can't find crime. That's it.
If you don't need you, we don't need you.
Well, here's my thing, though, is that there are so many different ways in which I would like to see greater enforcement. How about food safety? How about, making sure that our children have decent meals, or that school buses are respected in the streets, right? There's just a ton of different ways that I can think of that I might want to have.
Solving rape cases.
How about
solving rape cases, or making sure that things are safe for people. Right?
Human trafficking. Let's talk about human trafficking and child porn and
you guys know
monsters.
Anything about mold in rental homes and how bad that is in low income areas? And I actually talked to a couple of representatives out here. I'm kind of playing the fence right now, both the candidates that are running in my place, so I write them all the time. One of the big problems after working in investment properties for a long time is that you would have people say, hey, there's mold in the basement, or there's mold in the windows, or looks like the ceiling leaked from the roof and there's mold on the ceiling. These people don't have anything that works for them to get that removed from their home. They have to go through a lot. A lot of times you can't even find a case on it, which I find extremely crazy, because the top 10 ways a person dies in the state of Michigan, there's 3 of them that are all related to respiratory issues. Those respiratory issues came from people who live in low income. That's just crazy to think that, we're talking about mold and weed when, they make it impossible for somebody who's really concerned about it to actually get the help that they deserve from people who don't care. So that's kind of...
not equal citizens if you don't have enough money, right?
Hey, by the way, just incidentally, just to throw in there, the situation in Massachusetts. Man, I can't think of the woman's name right now, but I can get it.
Oh, the cannabis dust.
Yeah.
So there was a change in determination by OSHA. Her name is Lorna McMurray, the person who died, unfortunately, and they are now saying that removed her cause of death from their official report and replaced it with "to be added later."
So this is a very high profile case where a woman who was working in a pre-roll section of a cannabis factory died right on the floor there, which it was believed to have been because she inhaled so much cannabis dust from her operations there. And it was a big deal, but it took a long time for anybody to find out about it. They did a good job of keeping it quiet. Trulieve was fined quite a bit. Jamie, that's a big development, though, that they're potentially changing the cause.
I mean, the people saying, hey, cannabis caused the death. And of course, it was just, it was the particulate matter that helped to compromise the respiratory system potentially and that kind of stuff, but didn't actually cause the death, and got sick of that.
Particulate matter is not a cause of death. Respiratory failure is a cause of death.
Exactly.
Right.
And that could have been sawdust or anything else. Those things happen in a industrial scenario.
Report. A biased report from an agency who has in its core value not allowing cannabis in workplace.
Yeah, it's like if a 2-ton bale of weed hits you over the head, they're going to say, weed killed them, right? It's just
weed dust.
Gravity did it.
It's right. Come on.
I know quite a
Angel
few centers who actually had to leave jobs like that because of how bad it was.
Well,
I think Amy's daughter had to leave a company that she was with. She ended up being home for 2 weeks on medication, had to wear a 95 mask and all kinds of craziness.
Well, I maintain this. If we're going to go in these whole reefer madness people, here's where they go wrong. And, talking about it was the weed dust that killed you or whatever. Let's actually educate. There are interactions that can happen with cannabis. There are medications that interact with it. There are people who it can mess with their heart and whatnot. Let's educate the public in honesty, in all honesty and transparency. And the reality is it's not as prevalent and it's not as bad as what they make it out to be. But if we're open and honest with folks and talk about actual real risks, which are few and far between for many folks, some people, it could cause psychosis in some people. It could cause, whatever the issue may be, but let's talk about it.
It's similar to the particulate and sawdust. It could happen to be the thing that triggered that, but it didn't necessarily, have to be cannabis. They were predisposed to getting triggered into that scenario. So it's the same
or
kind
machinery or chemicals that was in the air. I mean, there's a lot of different things they use, herbicides.
Red Bull, you talk about energy drinks. Energy drinks can cause a heart attack, right? We know this. let's at least make it known it could. Is it probably going to happen to a majority? No, it's not going to. But let's at least be honest.
But Trish, you recently asked somebody to take down a display that was an anti-cannabis thing. Did you not? Did you?
I don't remember what you're talking about. I could have.
Some medical facility you went to that had a big chart on the wall that said the dangers of cannabis, and they had it up there for 21 years.
Oh no, that wasn't me. That was the lady from Healing Green. That was Jason and Shelley Strauss.
Fantastic.
Yeah, they've been working with schools, and I just thought it was amazing. 20 years. Like, what took you that long?
Well, and what they did was they said, can you please show us the scientific validity of all these complaints that you've put up on this thing here? Mm-hmm. And of course, they couldn't. So they took it down.
Story in cannabis. Yeah.
That had been poisoning minds for that long, for 2 decades.
Simply believe a bunch of shit that's not substantiated anywhere. It's just been talked about so much and internalized that people don't double
and the propaganda of it is so crazy. It's just this black kid that and it's all like covering him and all these. It's so stupid, man. Oh man.
When we talk about cannabis use, I mean, you can abuse anything, food, you name it, right? You can abuse it. So instead of being, that cannabis is the boogeyman, let's talk about why these people have the need that they feel they have to abuse it, right? Like, just like anything else, it would be it alcohol or pills or whatever. We don't talk enough about mental health and self-care.
And then that's true. And then we say
problem.
That we're happy that they somehow got fixated on cannabis instead of some of those other things. So while we do have an issue here, maybe to plow through, they're not killing themselves otherwise with all these other substances that could have been available.
Tobacco kills. We know this. Yep. And the advent, by the way, of the cannabis legalization movement in America has really done a big job on the tobacco industry. However, tobacco just made a bigger push in third world nations to try and continue the same production levels that they'd always had, just exporting their product to other places. So they've been very successful in addicting people to cannabis, to regular tobacco cigarettes in South America, Latin America, and Africa. So, even American cannabis brands are present in some places. Those are evil companies. They're just really bad. If you know that what you're doing hurts people and you still just say, I'm in it for the profit, no, there's no heavenly reward waiting for you, my friend.
Like that guy talking to us in Colin.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
None of you are getting into heaven. I'll tell you that much right now. I don't care what you say. None of you are getting into heaven. Right.
That's exactly right. Well, at least I won't be lonely.
Damn it.
I'll join you. I'll join you, Rick. No problem. Hey,
that was so funny.
I'll roll into hell like a fucking boss. That's what I say.
And you know what? He thought, he goes, "Are we going to vote?" He's like all excited. He thought they were going to vote and end this.
I'm not on council. Why would you ask if I'm going to vote? It's the first time you've ever seen me, and you want me to vote on this issue? That's not a good idea. But yeah, we've had so many of those encounters over the years, Jamie. We just have so many. Hey, by the way, I wanted to get in before I forget. We have a wonderful event coming up on November 9th. It's the telethon, the Cannabis Gives Back Charity Telethon 2022. Corporations can participate. You get actually for $1,000 spot, you get a little interview on the telethon, get to talk to some of the state podcasting peoples, and really support a wonderful cause. We're talking about a Great Lakes Expungement Network, Sons and Daughters United. What Josie Scoggin does with that money that we give her is just so fantastic. And they have success stories every single year. I know, Jamie, you've been shopping for those trips before with everybody and to get the stuff, the Christmas presents. For
me and Missy went out and did all that. Went down the list and talk about family. It was cool.
Seriously deserving charity. So please tune in to the Cannabash 2022. I'm sorry, the Telethon 2022, and that's November 9. And Ryan Basor Redemption really putting this on, really just doing a great job. Yep. Cannabis Gives Back Telethon 2022.
We'll be hosting, Rick. I mean, Jamie, you'll be there too, right? Mm-hmm. I'm helping out this year hosting as well. I can't wait. It's a great
no.
cause.
Yeah, we
It's
went to Lansing and their building on Washington, and set up upstairs in Josh's office, I think, and participate. I don't know if we're expected to show up on site this year. Or we're doing it from our home. I don't know. It works either way, but it was cool. It
I'm
worked
just
out
gonna
really
be
well.
happy to be there. You
Yeah,
know,
it was nice. It was fun.
yeah, it's a great time, and it's a good cause, and it's a lot of laughs too. By the way, because people they know that they've got just a short amount of time, so they try and get in everything they think they want to say, and they're trying to be funny because they want to be memorable. It's a great watch. It's going to last about
We
2
judge
hours.
them and then make fun of them after for a few minutes and then
That's
move
right.
on to the next. Yeah.
We usually run over a little bit, so 8 to 10 plus, let's just say. So something like that, but it'll be a lot of fun. Anton, I'm glad you're going to be joining us too. I believe we have. Do we have? Who's coming from the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association CannaCast? Do we know?
That'd be Ida. I don't know. Would that be?
I don't know.
Ida was on last.
Ida did. She's been doing her own show too on Mondays. That's pretty good. I think it's Light a Joint with Ida.
Mm-hmm.
Some good people on there, and she did show up at the rally today.
Yeah.
Too. So I don't know if she is taking on that role, but I wanted to acknowledge her show and the fact that she was out there in support today. Deputy Director, MICIA.
Yeah. Yep. I'm not sure who's going to be joining us as hosts, but it's pretty cool. So I did just want to slide that in there before I forgot, because I think
That's a
it
good
is
one.
a special deal.
We'll
It's
talk
a
about it
great
some more.
charity. It is a great charity.
Maybe
While
have
we're-
Ryan on before then and talk about it a little bit more.
We should.
While we're talking about charity stuff too, I'll say November 19th, we will have the turkey giveaway at Lighten Up again. We're doing another 1,000 turkeys. Hopefully
Didn't believe you were going to give them away in one day then either. And,
7 hours last year.
Or
So
they did. So that was pretty amazing. It was cool.
Yes. So that's a
See if-
good function. I can't wait for that one. That was fun.
Come on, man. Can you at least hear us, Mike?
He's
He's
trying.
been trying the whole show, man.
I think I can.
He's got such good stuff to say. He did a great job today, and
He's inspirational.
we'll give him a chance and hope that it connects somehow. I don't. There could be a thing where you're supposed to allow for access to the mic or something. I don't know. Or it could just be just not in a good, connection zone.
Oh,
There he is.
Hey.
You just got to unmute, and if we can hear you, it all comes together.
Hey!
Hey, all right.
Oh, wow, that worked.
You look like you're in the back of a police cruiser. What is it?
No, I'm in the front of one. No, I'm in a U-Haul van full of tents and festival materials.
Okay. I'm glad. I thought you were in danger and needed some help.
Oh, if I'm in the back of a police cruiser, the first place I'm calling is Jaz Cabbage Cafe.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's what I love. Yeah.
Hey, man, so great job today. We did have Brittany on earlier. We otherwise were talking about it.
Great.
And let us know what you want to throw in there. You'd have a hard time getting on the show. Let's get right at it.
It was a 40-degree day. It was wet. People still showed up.
So close.
Oh, am I there?
You're weaving in and out. You're here now. Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, we had a good rally today. We engaged in some civil disobedience. Jammed with a peyote on stage, was very neat and magical. But we're just grateful for the community showing up today. Right now, today was really a launch at the candidates for Michigan legislature. So next few weeks, we're going to really be getting out the vote and figuring out who supports us and that's a candidate. And if they do, we've got 1,000 trained volunteers. Let's put them to work for these candidates that are going to support us. And then, come January, hopefully by then we will have identified a champion and developed our legislative language and be ready to introduce that really early into the new session. And then immediately onward to the ballot.
Explained the peyote on the steps of the Capitol building. What was that?
So Tom Wall of Cosmic Knot does this thing called
Good friend of the show.
organoleptic
Yeah.
music. Yes. You've seen him plug in cannabis plants at Hash Bash. We did it with a peyote today on the Capitol steps.
Little
Peyote
plant.
listed as one of the things taken in the TUI raid, I believe.
Yes. Yes, it was. It was a federally protected plant of his partners, I believe.
Well, we discussed that too. That it was personal use and personal.
I need to say something about that issue.
Sure.
The standard practice of MSP and stuff to destroy plants. In the case of peyote, if they are destroying peyote, I don't care if it's protected or not. That is an endangered species. We need to go after them if they're destroying that sort of crop. Period.
That's interesting.
It's
I did not
Native
know
American
that.
church at worst.
So there's an argument that he's got
Yeah.
it in possession, in a way that works legally.
Well, there are legal protections for peyote.
If it turned out that he didn't, you're saying just on its own, it's a bald eagle. I guess maybe that, I'm not sure if that's still
I'm not sure if they're still protected. I know
their population has come back and they might have made the list.
It's a bald eagle for several practices and groups across North America and Mexico.
Peyote is like a bald eagle. I mean, so let's face it. If you were
endangered, protected, whatever,
it's certainly that kind of symbol.
I think so. So if you raided a place and they had a bald eagle illegally held in a cage, would you just, no, you don't just kill the illegal substance? Why would you do that?
Absolutely.
It's an endangered species, right?
So that's really interesting. I didn't know that, I guess somebody should be. And I'm sure he sounds like you may be one of them. We should be following up.
I'm going to make a big stink if something happened, but I'm going to, go through proper channels, try and find out what happened first before, I overreact. There's a sensible approach here.
Well, first of all, they were on property for at least 5 hours because they had TUI in the back of a police car for 5 hours. So that's perfectly enough time for them to have researched peyote's status to make a determination from a prosecutor who should be familiar with it too, and to make any kind of a consultation they needed before they did any action like digging something up.
And they knew it was an issue to get started with somehow. They recognize it.
If you went out in nature and dug up a peyote right now, you'd be looking at easily a minimum of 10 years if you were caught, unless you were protected by Native American church on certain protected grounds for harvesting. So yeah. If you're killing these, even if they're in a plant or in a pot, no, you should be prosecuted for that.
I love it.
And I didn't know that. I'm interested in how this
I think
unfolds. They could have very well given it back to him. I mean, they're going to give him back his guns and stuff.
I don't know if
No, that stuff's sitting in an evidence locker because the warrant would have given them authorization to seize any Schedule 1 narcotics. So mescaline being Schedule 1, they would have. They're probably sitting and rotting away in some evidence locker in MSP's locker.
That's typically
They probably
what
have
do.
no clue. They're probably totally
Yep, snatch it all and let the court sort it out.
Pots in there. Oh. Even if they broke the pots and they were in a pile,
Man, that sucks. There's some passion and some good information and all types of stuff that we can't hear right now.
That's a shame.
Man, you're weaving in and out, Mike. I hear you talking about the issue if they were fucking with that plant, and even if it was, even if the pot was broken or whatever, you still want to make sure you're in a position to save that thing, or that somebody saves that.
We have people. Even if they have a, issue with Dewey himself, there are plenty of places within Michigan that are federally protected where they can be taken and protected.
All right.
Got to expect the cops to be acting above board.
Yeah, and there's got to be an agency that cares about protecting these species that have this status, and they would obviously, I mean, have interest in this.
Absolutely.
And who is that?
I think, you know, that's probably like Department of Natural Resources. Although it's not natural because it's in a.
Oh, ouch!
There it is.
Oh, he was doing so well.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too, because I'm a member of the Native American Church myself. I've been a member for about 3 years. And, you know, I do know that there are several, like the church itself puts out specific parameters, you know, for you to be in compliance with the church's mandates. You can have 3 peyote buttons or 1/8 of mushrooms, or like they spell it out. Right. And I mean, there are religious protections. Absolutely. That go along with these entheogenic substances. They're absolutely sacraments. And, I mean, do the cops, are they going to do their due diligence?
Well, no, they're ignorant. They're ignorant. I think they probably don't even understand that the medical act was something they should have taken into consideration with this investigation.
They may not care. They may just say, look, like that. There was a saying,
opportunity to burn his shit down without much consequence.
No, there's a saying, it's called, you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. Right. You can sort all that shit out in court. We don't give a fuck. You're still taking a ride.
Seize it all and let the court sort it out.
Exactly.
That's what they've done to us for over a decade.
It happens. It does happen. Absolutely.
Yep. And of course, there's been some very famous cases where the police were forced to give things back. Grow Green MI, Tony Energy, as he's known on Facebook, has a very famous video of an entire semi truck backed up to the evidence place at a Michigan State Police thing, and they loaded his semi truck up with all the shit they had taken from him, and he happily drove away a winner. So there are times when
Jamie Fricke challenged the people in Lapeer County for not giving her back her shit.
Hero.
Yeah. I sued Ingham County in 2011 and got my shit back.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So it does happen, but the problem is the whole concept of seize it all, right? Unless you can prove without a doubt that it is contraband, it's just a tractor. Leave the fucking tractor. Why are you taking a tractor? So he can't tractor anymore? Guess what? It's October.
I just wonder, they went in there to just stop his operation, burn it down, and then just grab something to help kind of reimburse the cost for doing it. And just like, you're not going to come after your tractor,
They burned the plant. I see how they did. They actually burned the plants right there. That's crazy. That is crazy.
See, that's the psychology that they have when they come in.
Effect, yeah.
Yep, that's the gotta have a win. You know?
How did they not know they weren't hemp plants? Like, if they were hemp and he was just in, because I know that I read that he didn't re-up his MDARD hemp license or whatever.
He didn't like some provision on it, but apparently that's been taken off now in the last year.
Yeah. So destroying the actual plants. I'm just curious what I don't know. I haven't seen the warrant. So
yeah. So I mean, last night we kind of broached the fact that they overreached, and maybe they could be called out on some of that stuff. Certainly, that it's weird that there's no conviction in there, and there's not $50,000 worth of stuff or whatever, and they still took his tractor. So they're setting that up for.
Well, they're saying that. Well, what they'll say is that the tractor was used in the manufacture of the Schedule I narcotic, is what they're saying, and I would assume that was what was assisting the production of those cannabis plants.
And they used to do that all the time, but that was before there was a couple of tweaks in the law. I mean, so I don't know why they weren't moved by that necessarily. But yes, that must be what they're thinking. But
I'm just thinking that's probably the rationale.
Yeah,
they're raiding an unlicensed hemp farm. They know it's an unlicensed hemp farm, not an unlicensed THC farm, right? So is there really a Schedule I narcotic at stand here?
And we don't even we don't even treat it like that. We have the MRTMA. Like, again, there's no like real urgency here. So I can walk up to him and ask him what the fuck is going on. So anyway, I just can't stand that stuff. We were joined with Jim Salame in the meantime, also at the rally today.
And Mike,
also, like,
Mike finally
Mike's
got a good
back.
connection again.
Looks like he's got a good connection. We've been wasting it by
Yeah,
not
well,
letting him talk.
we're back to Grand Rapids. I've been, cruising in and out of side roads this whole time.
Right. So Jim, how you doing, man? You were at the
Great.
rally today. Your thoughts?
It was great for the turnout for the weather that we had. I think was awesome, and there's a lot of excitement there. And yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was, it seemed like it was sunny when I looked back at it, but it was cold. It was windy, but just everyone was just in a good mood and was speaking everyone was speaking their heart. It was great. I went to the after party at the Fledge in Lansing, not too far away from the Capitol.
Yeah, I've been there before
for a little bit. Smoked with those guys and
sure.
It was fun.
Very cool. A good place to go afterward. I know that's where it was, but we did have an interview with Brittany.
Oh, excellent.
For a little while, yeah, and kind of introduced herself a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Brittany's been amazing. She really has stepped up and filled in a lot of the gaps for the campaign. I'm a great organizer, but organized is something I'm not. And she's great, and we've made a great team. We've got a great team behind us, so we're doing great. I'm very grateful to have her along.
Yeah, it is. This, I mean, the stuff that you guys have done has been really impressive. As I said today on the steps, I really meant it. And you guys just keep moving forward and getting some shit done. It's gonna, hopefully part of the conversations we've had is kind of learning, from the process of cannabis going for years beforehand, and you realize you might push a couple dominoes at once. There might be some good stuff that happen in stretches, but by and large, it's a slow process. It's largely incremental, and but you're doing what it takes to get it there.
It really is. There's a big vision, but that's not just going to happen with a snap of our fingers. It's going to take time and stages. But the thing is, there isn't a model. I'm not going to consider the Oregon model because it's a non-model, but we've gotten into that. I'll get into it some other time, I'm sure.
Sorry about the all drug thing and
the all drug
Oregon.
thing, the Oregon psilocybin model, all of it's trash. 109, 110, they're both trash. But nobody's done it right at the state level. And that's, why we formed MISH out of the movement of DNMI. DN is really focused on city resolutions and this bottom-up approach. But we recognize that, these big groups that are going to Colorado and California and places like that are eventually going to eyeball Michigan. So we're trying to be on the front end, protect home grow, grow, gather, gift model, gathering in community, sharing, that sort of thing. But also, if an industry is coming to Michigan, which it inevitably is, create the momentum and the support necessary to build that from within Michigan and not from people outside of Michigan, and make sure that, whatever the equivalent of the MRA or whatever that comes out of it is defined in the language ahead of time instead of randomly appointed, representation of the community and people that need to be represented. We can do better in Michigan, and that's what MISH and Michigan Initiative for Community Healing is.
Nice stretch.
And hopefully you heard that.
Well, man, there's only 2 words or 3 words maybe that we didn't, because right at the end it froze, but then you said hopefully you heard that.
I think he's still.
It froze him with a nice smile, man. That's
one of the best
right.
freezes I've ever seen.
Yeah,
that's right.
Pretty friendly.
But it is tough, when you're trying to launch a statewide effort and you're not doing it in isolation. Other states are doing similar things. Sometimes local communities are also doing similar pushes. It's tough to not only craft a statewide policy, but also to coordinate with all the other groups still trying to do the same thing you are.
And you need money, but you're trying to keep big money interests out of it. There's that
Yeah,
balance.
that's
It's really
always
difficult, man. And Jim
not everybody
knows. I mean, that's part of the discussion.
Yeah,
can't be
it's
Bernie Sanders. Okay.
it's no different than the cannabis industry and how that's gone, and MCMA, and that's what's basically was created because of that lack of stewardship of these companies coming in and not knowing about the movement here. And I'm talking about the stewardship of the movement, like welcoming some of these people, or at least bringing them down to what goes on here in Michigan, because they come in without realizing the culture here and the amount of years that cannabis and activism has been running since the days of Sinclair.
Yeah.
So I don't think people realize that aspect of it.
They
This is
underestimate it, right? Like Jim,
Yeah.
it seems like there's a serious underestimation of how Michigan, it sounds to me, it seems to run differently than say your California or even like your Oklahomas, like those other states that our caregiver model is a good example that you don't see that in other states, and it's deeply ingrained and entrenched into the culture, and the culture kind of bled over to the industry, and it seems like that's something we want to prevent on the entheogenic side, that industrial encroachment of these, like you said, big pharma coming in, or even just these big corporate entities coming in and just screwing the system over. Now, do you think the ballot initiative, if I'm correct, it doesn't have an industrial model, right? It's a gifting.
It's a decrim.
Shit.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. So
Decriminalize.
do you think that decrim is what could protect us from having these big corporations come in and fuck things up?
I don't think that it's going to protect us from that. I think that's still going to happen.
Really? Okay.
But in some capacity or another, I can't see how that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but if it happens while protecting individual rights, the right to create mushrooms in your home and pass it around with other people and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, just like I think that decades-long medical law that we had with cannabis, from was it 2008 to 2018, right? Roughly. Right. So
the medical bill 2008, right?
Yeah. So that I think that what entrenched us in the spot we're at now. Well, where we can, as activists and as these big groups, carry on the same way that we did with cannabis, and it's almost like we've rooted ourselves, and everyone who's part of the cannabis industry also understands how important this industry, the psychedelic side, is, and it's all the same. It's just basically all the same, and it's awesome, and I'm excited to be in Michigan because of that. Michigan is different because of that movement and the people that are all part of this statewide.
Yeah, I brought it up earlier. The co-founder of the National Decrim, Larry
Norris, Dr. Larry Norris.
Yeah. He showed up. Wasn't expected. He was there, but one of the things he pointed out was how he recognized that what you were saying about Michigan. It's a unique group here, unique set of accomplishments. The way things are going is really kind of cool comparatively, and he recognized that. I thought that was that was cool to hear from his perspective, coming from San Francisco.
For sure.
And they just did some good work in San Francisco recently too.
They did. Well, Decrim Nature's, I think his organization, he's the co-founder of Decrim Nature out of Oakland, California. His group has really had a big focus on Michigan because of just the amount of activism and excitement and the community that's here.
That's cool. Yeah, it's
It
good
is
to
really
be
cool.
known for that. Jim, you're really talking about the parallel between cannabis and the movement that we have and what's going on with entheogenic substances now. In what ways are the entheogenic substance movement in a better shape than we were when we started?
I think we're seeing it already in the media. We're seeing hits on news reports, in social media, in just news links that you find on the web. I think there's cannabis kind of forged that path for that acceptance. Maybe it is a gateway in some ways, but not in the ways people refer to it as. It's a gateway for understanding that there are other medicines that are natural that can also help you. And I think that's probably one of the biggest parts there. It's also, it doesn't have the stigma like cannabis, marijuana, weed does, because that's always been kind of the forefront of like hippies and you're doped up or you're high, and all these derogatory words that we still like to use, but way back when, I think they came about because people were obviously wanting to degrade the use of cannabis, and that became a big part of our society and a big part of how we, most of society looked upon it. I think for a long time, except for the small. Now you see the majority's changing.
So I think that's true for most plant-based medicines, right? A lot of them struggle to get acceptance early on, and now people are, you can call it what you want, more woke, more up to date, but
we're
folks are more
broken.
accepting of these alternative ways of treating their conditions.
I think it's the fact too, we're so broken. We're out of options. We've gotten to the end of the road, right? The suicide rate is tremendous in this country, and we've been over medicated as a population for decades now. We're at the end of the road, folks. There's either, what do we do now? And I'll say for me, with the veteran population, like ayahuasca had a tremendous impact on me, and as far as my healing process, and psilocybin and San Pedro, like one of the most therapeutic things I ever did was drink San Pedro in Peru. There were no doctors there. It was me. I drank the San Pedro and I laid there and enjoyed nature, and it was healing, right? So you have testimony from people who have been over medicated and poisoned by these things. And our testimony is these things help. And it can't be refuted. You can't tell me I'm full of shit because saved my life, right? So there's credibility among the population and among people who have been subjected to pharmaceutical torture, right? And so there's credibility there that cannabis may not have had, and that like Jim is saying, there was these stigmas attached that have been decades old. But now we have no other option, and the bureaucrats can't deny that. We got to do something, folks, and I think there's a certain sense of credibility there.
Yeah, and with that being said, Rick, and Anton, I agree with you too about all that. It's but we still have to educate, and I think that's the difference too between these movements, from cannabis and the psychedelic movement, because everyone knows what weed does pretty much. And if you smoke too much of that, you're just gonna end up on a couch or maybe just eating out your refrigerator, for the night. But we need more education on this stuff.
There's risks, sure.
As fast as it's moving, we need it.
Sure.
I think that one of the things is most people in America have had a cannabis experience. I think that there's some statistics are showing up to 50% of adults in states where the legalized cannabis have actually tried it. I would imagine the number of people who've actually tried entheogenic substances much, much lower. So instead of relying on a base that has personal experience, you're relying on a base that is just learning from other people's experience.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about it, and we're kind of somewhat winding down. We got a few minutes. I wanted to get in just at least to offer up the headlines of the development of the Lee Chatfield case. We did talk about this a lot last fall when those guys were involved with the shitty anti-caregiver bills, which we still should have some concern about. Had a conversation with Senator Irwin today. It's not like they're done pushing that shit. Who knows what twists and turns and different approaches they'll take when the horse trading begins. So keep that vigilance, in check. But there was accusations of. I think first of all we heard about a group of these people, like some of these lawmakers. And Linder maybe also being involved or somehow connected and things like that, and that they were out in Vegas and they were
washing money from private accounts and then going and spending it on hookers,
big hotels and hookers and cocaine and stuff like that. And they were talking like last, and you should remember this actually, Trish, because we talked about it a little bit, but there was just an investigation going on. It wasn't like they were totally ready to start saying that he might be connected to some activity that's not cool. And as it turns out, really, let me read the article that came out today. Detroit News has got one for sure. Maybe there's other ones.
There are 13 bills in the House right now from probably about 30 different sponsors that are for conflict of interest and for being able to block lobbying from representatives for at
Good.
least 2 years. And it just
They're not-
never
they're not gonna
goes
pass
anywhere
this
from
session,
there.
but they're good.
Yeah.
So,
but
so I just wanted to finish. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
no, you. I wanted to.
That's what. Yeah, that the apparently his family essentially, you know, it
Rolled
appears
over
turned
on
on him.
the-
Yeah. So and then there was another side story about how he's had a inappropriate affair with his sister-in-law starting from when she was young, before she married his brother when she was 15, and that was out. That was information that was out in the news and stuff too, and didn't look good for him then. A few months later, now he's actually, coming out in the news for there being connections and such, meaning the investigation has gone on, and some of the dots have actually been connected, and now they're saying, here's what we think is bad, and they describe how he's taken money from his charitable accounts and all that stuff.
The accounts would write checks to his brother and sister-in-law, and they would cash them and then give him the money. They never provided any services or any value for those checks. It was simply a scheme in order for that to whitewash that and get that cash. And that's what they would use, that cash, to go out to Vegas and untraceably all these fun weekends.
The guy who was on the regulatory committee, the last fall that we were passed all these stupid bills, went along with all the bad shit and all that kind of stuff. He was talked about as being kind of connected to some of this stuff. Some of these other guys that were involved in that at the time.
Which one was that, Jamie?
So I'm not sure what area he's out of, but he's a state house rep, and he's also on the regulatory reform committee.
His name?
Yeah, who was? Which one?
Matt Hall.
Oh,
Matt
wow.
Hall.
Yeah, and he would be in line, I think, to be like, if the Republicans get majority of the House, I think he, at one point anyway, would be vying for becoming Speaker.
Well, it's a fun job. Jesus, look at
that.
That's a really serious. That's a
perks.
serious allegation.
Slightly risky, but a couple of perks, Whoa. Well, by the time they came out today with it, I mean, they were like giving out details of, how they think all this shit went down. So it seems like it's further along than.
And that's because those were disclosed in court documents. Nobody just gave them that. That was filed in court in support of the request for additional whatever. So that's official part of the public record. Lee Chatfield, and by the way, they said that his sister-in-law has been cooperating with this investigation since day one. No doubt he raped her at 15 years of age, because you can't consent in Michigan.
Oh, that was an asshole about it while he was being confronted with it and stuff.
I remember when he said, in my religion or something like that, he made some kind of.
Said it was consensual the whole time.
Oh yeah. So
you can't leverage, that type of, scenario onto the minor at 15 and be like, hey, consensual.
Can we
just get
a person like this? Because there's so many people that make these choices. They're just so stupid and self-serving. Can we get what he puts in his body? I mean, I know I put cannabis in mine, and mushrooms and ayahuasca and whatnot, but what about that guy? I mean, is he drinking a lot? What, is he taking a lot of pills?
Tiger blood.
Like, what is it that he's like? What kind of imbalance that would make him make these decisions? Is it his
money?
Food? Eating Taco Bell every night?
Greed and power.
Invincibility. When you feel like you're untouchable, then everything is just an obstruction to be moved around. You're never going to get a consequence. You're never going to go to jail. You're so powerful. You're untouchable. And therefore you do the worst things because your true you gets to show out. So I know a lot of people that are also equally untouchable, but are loyal husbands and wives, and they go home and they love their kids, and they don't snort coke off hookers' fun parts, which I'm assuming Lee Chatfield did because he's just that kind of a gross dude.
Well, with money from a charity.
Well, oh yeah, that's right. That's what really makes it dirty.
That's
money.
Give you a little slightly better buzz, a little more spring in
Children
your step.
don't have shoes. I don't care.
Dun, dun, dun.
So so that's a little. Well, I mean, we're sure we'll talk more about that one, but that's a little update from. We did talk about it months ago, but it's one of those things, there's so many things happen that it's hard to even keep track of them. Remember that they were a thing anymore,
And when we go to testify, and when we go to the legislature, and we speak, and these people sit in judgment of us. They sit at the chairman's position, and they decide whether they've heard enough from Rick Thompson or not, or how many minutes they're going to give our community to testify in committee. And then the Speaker of the House, he's the one that decides which ones of our bills get considered or even brought up. for a whole vote in the House. Many bills have passed committee and never passed the House because the Speaker would not bring them for a vote. So to think that that's the caliber of person that is making these crucial decisions and really stymieing our advancement at every step of the way. It's no wonder we've had such a hard road with the cannabis industry and cannabis law reform when we're facing with this kind of an opponent who really is in many, many ways invincible.
Yeah. Hey, so we are at the end of the time. That would have been a nice way to end us, Rick, but now you're going to be on the line for another one because we'll spin
Well,
around
the
real
invincible
quick.
speech wasn't good enough. Oh, shit.
Jim, anything you want to lay on before we wrap it up tonight?
No, just a good day today out in the rally. I know Mike had to fall off. He did a great job today.
You did. Mike and Brittany were both.
Brittany, and it turned out really great. So
we'll have both of them back on too. Trish, anything you want to make sure you get in before we wrap it up? And thank you very much for being on for the show today. It's always really, really nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. Now, I think I'm just kind of digesting everything I took down in my notes right now.
That thing about the police is a big fucking deal, man. That's, you know.
Like, you guys don't realize, like, how much I obsess about this stuff after I get done with you. Like, I'll be up till, like, 2 o'clock in the morning on everything you were talking about at the end of the day.
We'll sleep over it, but we got to work on it. That's for sure. You're better off if you've gotten some nice rest in. So
I do.
It's going to take a while. But thank you for all your work and all your research and organizing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anton.
Good show as always. We touched on many different topics, but we talked about some good stuff today too. I think the veteran grant resolution is a major positive, and we focus on the positives. We fight for the negatives, and we try. And at the end of the day, peacefully and with love, we should be embracing each other. And hopefully it sounds like we need to hold our politicians accountable. And yeah, man, let's progress. Let's move forward. Great show.
Yeah, really good job on all that, spearheading that whole series of events that led to resolution.
Thank you.
It was cool to be around. Rick, and again, thanks to Mike and Brittany and everybody who came on and joined us and people participating in the comments and all that kind of stuff. So another good show. I thought we had a lot of interesting topics too. Rick, you want to wrap us up, please?
Yeah, I sure will. You know what? We just talked about wonderful coming together moments and some of the successes we had, especially with a couple of the rallies and some of the other things, certainly with the veteran study. And then we also talked about the Toohey case, where we're right back to 2007 all over again, it seems, with guns drawn and coming in over an unlicensed hemp farm based on some kind of an anonymous phone call, which is all very sketchy. So the fact is we have so much to be positive about. I'm so glad that we ended the show on a high note, but we're not doing our due diligence if we're not informing the people about all the consequences that could potentially befall them and the circumstances that are going on right now. Now, don't forget to vote November 8th. But be kind to everybody. I mean, you let's just go through life that way. Be nice to each other and join us on Jaz Cabbage Cafe next week. That's my message.
Right on. Thanks a lot. Jaz Cabbage Cafe next week. See you guys. Thank you.